and welcome to this week's Property Matters, the show that brings global trends to an Irish audience to help shape your knowledge of the industry. You can contact us on Twitter at iPropertyRadio or by email at hello@iPropertyRadio.com. Your hosts today are Carol Talla and myself, Brian Fox.
Okay, and today we have something a little different for you. We're joined by Tom Gilligan, Director of Services at Mayo County Council and instigator of the Vacant Homes initiative, Vacanthomes.ie. The entirety of this show will be focused on the issue of vacant homes right across the country, and we'll look at some of the solutions and incentives in place to bring these vacant homes back into use at a time when they're critically needed. Tom, you're very welcome.
Thanks, Carol, and thanks, Brian. Thanks. Glad to be here. Thank you very much indeed.
Good to see you.
Good. And Tom, Vacanthomes.ie, it's something that we've seen, we've read about a lot over the last maybe 2 years, is it? How did this initiative come to happen? How did it come into being?
Yeah, it's an initiative that was set up by Mayo County Council back in August 2017. And it was announced by Minister Owen Murphy as part of one of the early initiatives in advance of the vacant home strategy in order to bring vacant homes back into use. So the idea originated, I came up with the idea basically one night. Myself and my wife were out walking and we came across, our local village would be in Corofin, and we came across a number of empty vacant properties, and my wife literally said to me, well, it wouldn't be great if we could do something if the council could do something in order to bring them back into use. So that's really, in a sense, is where the idea originated from. So after doing basic research in relation to what other areas, other countries were doing as well, so the whole idea of vacant homes came into being. And the initiative, I suppose, it's based around the whole idea of crowdsourcing. So the idea of getting people to help you, to provide information, to assist you. And it's to try, I suppose, what we're asking, I suppose, we're trying to mobilise communities in order to help us to identify possible vacant properties in order to get them back into use. Because we believe that local people have the local knowledge. And from that point of view, I think their information...
This is a sort of Celtic Tiger recession legacy, is it?
Well, I suppose...
Because, I do remember at the time there were a lot of properties that were left vacant because people were trying to build second homes and so forth, and they couldn't take them up. That's right,
Brian. Well, I suppose if you look back, so the last official census, 2016, identified in excess of 183,000 vacant properties.
Really?
183,000
vacant properties, and that didn't include holiday homes. So that represented about 9% of the total housing stock in the country. Now, in any, I suppose, functioning or properly, functioning housing market, there's always a level of vacancy.
Yeah.
But I think it was recognised that the vacancy in Ireland was particularly high. Now, saying that, I suppose the figures in relation to census 2016, the Geo Directory will come up with a figure of less than 100,000. But there's no doubt there are a large number of vacant properties
But you
out
just
there.
go through the steps so that you took, because yourself and your wife were out there walking, you saw these vacant houses. What did you do after that? Because obviously they're all caught up in titles, etc., etc.
That's right. Well, I suppose the first thing, I suppose, in a sense, with the whole idea of the website, I suppose, is really is to allow people, I suppose, to anonymously log properties. So if someone comes across a possible vacant property, that can be logged, and then what happens as well is that each local authority, and one of the initiatives, I suppose, the department and the minister instigated was the installation of the creation of vacant homes officers in each of the local authorities. So each local authority has a vacant home officer. So the information, I suppose, that people provide into vacanthomes.ie, that information then goes to each vacant home officer, and then they can use that information in order to follow up, to try and find, in relation to if the property is vacant, who the owner is, advise the owner if they can get in contact with them, the number of schemes that are available in order to bring it back into use. And we find that that's probably the best way to do it, is actually making contact with people, because people, I suppose there are a number of reasons why property is vacant. I suppose, people, they mightn't have the money to bring the property back into use. It might be someone who might be in a nursing home or in the care of a relative. it could be an owner who's probably emigrated to another country and, maybe may or may not be coming back. So there was a myriad of reasons why property was vacant. So, and each property has its own unique story. And I think John and Evelyn will probably, reiterate that particular point. So it's very important, I think, in a sense that once that information is captured, much information properly as possible, then that information is used then by the Vacant Homes Officer and goes out then and try and contact the owner in order to bring the property back into use.
It must be very time consuming though to go through
It
that
is,
from the point
it
of view
is,
of
it actually
employing
is,
a person to do that.
To actually, to actually try and contact the owner. Now, so some owners may not be too far away from the residence itself or from the property itself, but others probably, as I said, have immigrated. So it can take time.
Yeah.
And each property, as I say, has its own different story, so its own uniqueness. And I think it's a thing of really doing it case by case, property by property, trying to get that property back into use. But there is nothing better, and I mean, when we get properties logged and then we get notifications from maybe the Vacant Home Officer to say that a particular property is brought back into use, I mean, there's no greater feeling to think that, that you could possibly, that there's a home now provided for a family. So, we have a particular, I suppose, in relation to, we're in the middle of a housing crisis, we have a large number of people that are homeless. So bringing vacant homes back into use, I think, is certainly one way we can try and provide homes for people with a housing need.
Okay, and so how long has the website been live?
The website was initiated back in August 2017.
Right, so we're heading into 2 years.
We're heading to 2 years.
Do we know, has it been successful at all?
Yes,
do we know?
We have at the moment, I suppose, in a sense, we have in excess of 3,000 properties on the website, and it's growing day by day. And we're absolutely delighted with the response that the public, and we've great collaboration as well, and I mean the Department of Housing, Planning and Local Government have been very proactive and very helpful with us as well in relation to this whole initiative, and with the Vacant Home Officers and with people on the ground. It's been and every day I think we're seeing more and more people connecting to the website, logging properties, giving us the feedback that we need in order to ensure that we get those properties back into use. Because if I can just say as well, apart from the whole aspect in relation to providing a home, which is obviously critical, bringing vacant properties back into use, I mean, one of the things I'm really passionate about is the whole idea that you have the housing aspect, but you also have the aspects in relation to regeneration.
And community.
Because you have a vacant property in an area. Some of them can attract antisocial behaviour.
Yeah.
They can have a very negative economic impact on a community, and particularly in relation to properties around them. So that aspect as well, and also too as well, it also helps protect local services. Because obviously the more if you can bring that property back into use, you can help protect local services such as schools and shops
and post office, which are very relevant at the moment.
And also provide employment too as well, because obviously bringing the property back into use, you have carpenters, you have plumbers, you have civics, engineers as well. So it's so important, I think, for so many reasons, that we try and bring these properties back into use.
Absolutely, and I think 3,000 properties logged on the website over 2 years is amazing. But have we any idea how many of those have actually, have any of them been turned into homes?
We have, I suppose, at the moment, we have in region about 250 to 300 that are either brought back or being brought back into use. And every day, I think we're seeing more and more properties, because it does take time.
Yeah,
it does take time.
Yeah.
So I suppose we have to be, there are no, it's something, I suppose, in the sense that we have to appreciate too. It takes patience, it takes time, but I think the benefits, we're really starting to see the benefits now coming through.
Well, absolutely. I mean, 300 homes being brought back into use that otherwise weren't in use, just because the community is actually getting engaged in logging vacant properties is amazing. So I think that, to know that 300 people or families have been housed in homes that otherwise simply couldn't even have been counted as homes, that's absolutely, that's fantastic. I mean, that's a very fast response over 2 years, and actually hopefully that will motivate people listening in to say, actually, it's absolutely worthwhile to go onto the website, log a property if you know, or if you think that it might be vacant. Because I presume if a member of the public logs a property that they think is public and they're wrong, I presume that just won't go any further with the Vacant Homes Officer.
No, I suppose, because when people log it, obviously then the Vacant Home Officer will go out and investigate.
Yeah.
And determine, I suppose, by making inquiries and by their own investigations as to whether the property is actually vacant.
I'm just curious, Tom, has there any research been done on what county has more or less vacant homes? I mean, is Mayo particularly... has it
I think so. I suppose
proportion of them?
Yeah, there is. I suppose in Mayo in particular, I suppose we would have a total of the census indicated a total of maybe 65,000 actually a stock of housing stock, and in the region of about 15,000 of those. I mean, over 23% of those would be vacant. Now, in saying that as well, I suppose we have to also bear in mind that there are a number of properties that are vacant where there may not be a social housing need.
Yeah.
So I think that would be critical as well.
That's an important distinction, isn't it?
It is, yeah, because I mean, but we still have a large number of towns, a large number of villages, a large number of urban areas that have vacancy within them. And I think from the point of view, in order to, and here it's all about supply and demand. There's a huge demand for housing. It's
and is there any policy on whether or not it can be purchased for rental or for an actual ownership? Is there any policy on that? Do you have to, is that determined by the buyer, or by the local authority?
Well, I suppose there are a number of schemes that are available, really, I suppose, for the homeowner. I mean, if the homeowner decides to do up the property, there's a scheme there in relation to repair and leasing scheme. Now, if the homeowner, maybe in a case where the property has reached a sort of dereliction stage, there's a buy and renew, whereby the local authority can go in and purchase that property if they feel that it will suit their particular needs. And I think the great thing, I suppose, in a sense, about these schemes is that they're there so to assist people. And I think they're there to try and help people who may, particularly maybe from a financial point of view, or maybe from a motivation point of view, because some people, I suppose, in a sense, might want to bring a property back, but they might not want to be managed tenants or deal with tenants, etc. So I suppose from that point of view, it gives, they're able to a way to bring the property back into use, provide housing, but still, I suppose, in a sense, not take a day-to-day.
The reason I ask is because I'm just wondering if it's sort of a well-moneyed entrepreneur, shall we say, comes in and swoops up a whole estate, shall we say, of these houses and rents them out. Then would that be?
Yeah, we haven't seen. I suppose what we primarily see an awful lot of people, I suppose, in relation to they might have inherited a particular property. They might have been left a particular property in relation to from a relative. Or it could be just that they might have purchased a property at a particular time, and maybe hoping to use it themselves, but maybe the circumstances have changed. Yeah. So I think from that, there's so many, and I suppose in Ireland in particular, so we have maybe accidental landlords that have had a property, but it was probably never envisaged that they would be a landlord or a property owner from that point of view. So, but I think the good thing about it is that there are schemes there to try and help people. Yeah. And I suppose what we have to do as part of the whole Vacanthomes.ie initiative is to spread the word and get the word out there. And as I say, we said, so people come on to www.vacanthomes.ie. There's information there as well to help people in order, and as I say, if they log on with the local authorities onto their websites as well, they can see the initiatives as well, and through the Department of Housing.
Yeah. Okay. I think Brian raised a really interesting point there about savvy investors kind of coming in and picking up. So would it be fair to say that Vacanthomes.ie will be picking up on the properties that the market hasn't picked up on? So as in, properties maybe that they just either haven't come to the market, or they've been sitting on the market for years and there's just no demand there. So is it a case that maybe Vacanthomes.ie is actually filling the void that's been left by the market?
Well, I suppose in any market, I suppose, really, I suppose for a proper functioning market, I suppose it is recognised that there'll be some level of vacancy. But from the point of view where we're sitting at the moment and where we're looking at it, that vacancy rate in certain areas of the country is still too high.
Right, yeah.
So I think in a sense, and I suppose, if you have a property investor, they might look at maybe other schemes, maybe just in relation to maybe commercial development or commercial units, or they might look at, particularly in relation to maybe student accommodation as being maybe certain aspects of it that might be more attractive. I suppose the beauty of Vacanthomes.ie is that we can encompass all of that, but from our point of view, I suppose in a sense it's specifically targeted to try and increase the supply of housing, particularly in the whole area of social housing. And if you take now, there was a recent report came out from daft.ie that indicated that there was only 2,700 properties for rent in the entire country. I mean, that has huge implications going forward, because obviously the whole thing in relation to supply is an issue, rent prices is an issue. So the more properties that are brought back into use, it certainly will help to cool the market going forward, because everyone of us is competing for that small pool in relation of properties. So, we find that some property owners are exiting the market. They want to get out, they want to sell. At the moment, as was in relation to maybe the fee, there's no probably financial incentive there for them in relation to taxation and that, but I still think it's absolutely critical that homeowner, anyone who has a property, they can really do something about this housing crisis, and if they really...
in about 20 seconds, is the crowdsourcing working, or how is that? It
is working, yeah.
It is.
Because
people are reacting.
People are reacting, and local people have that local knowledge. So even a property, I could pass the property, you could pass the property of Brian every day. You mightn't think it's vacant, but local people have that local knowledge. And nowadays, I suppose, in a sense, everyone has access to a computer, everyone has access to the internet, and people nowadays are and it's up to everyone. I mean, this housing crisis, I think this gives everyone an opportunity to try and provide a solution.
Yeah,
so
absolutely. Tom, I think that's just important, and there's so many bits of there in terms of the schemes, what's available, that we really need to dig a little bit deeper into. So thank you for joining us. And I know you're going to stay with us now,
Indeed, Karen,
but after the break we will be speaking to Evelyn Graham, Vacant Homes Officer with Kilkenny County Council, so stay tuned.
Your community radio for South Dublin. This is Dublin South FM.
Welcome back to Property Matters here in Dublin South FM with Carol Tanner and myself, Brian Fox. You can contact us on Twitter at iPropertyRadio or email hello@iPropertyRadio.com. So as mentioned before the break there, this is a Vacant Home special. We're now joined in the studio by Tom Gilligan. We were joined and staying in the studio, Tom Gilligan, Director of Service at Mayo County Council and a driver of Vacanthomes.ie. But we're also delighted now to be joined by Evelyn Graham, who is Vacant Homes Officer of Kilkenny County Council. Evelyn, you're very welcome.
Thank you.
So,
go ahead.
The idea is spread now to Kilkenny, obviously, Evelyn.
Yeah, we're all over the country. Yeah, Vacant Homes Officers.
But I wouldn't imagine there are as many vacant homes in Kilkenny as there are in Mayo.
No, that's right. As I was saying to people earlier, we've escaped the worst ravages of the post-Celtic Tiger bust, and we didn't have that many ghost estates or unfinished estates, and the small number that were there have been kind of dealt with now. Some of them brought into social housing use, or approved housing bodies have taken them on.
And I suppose it's been an attractive proposition there for buyers as well through crowdsourcing, as Tom was explaining there before the break. It's been an attractive proposition for buyers.
Yeah,
on the crowdsourcing idea as well.
Yeah, and I think the percentage of vacancies is kind of small then, on a par with the eastern counties, such as the Kildares and Meads and those sort of areas. So we're not as bad as I know further west. The vacancies are quite a bit higher.
Of course, but again in Kilkenny, obviously it's a city, it's a regional city, but you're dealing with the towns and the hinterland, and you have some rural areas there.
Yeah, so, that's particular.
Are you finding that there's a difference between, say, the city and some of the more urban areas?
Definitely. In the surveys that we've carried out, we've identified approximately 250 houses around the city and county. Now, a lot of the ones in the city are maybe coming on stream with, a little multi-house development or apartment development, something like that.
Okay.
But we've more properties coming available in some more remote villages, and some of the towns have suffered a lot of kind of vacancy, dereliction, loss of retail, with shopping centres, and some places have no shops left, and then there's a lot of vacant properties and over-the-shop properties.
Over-the-shop property seems to be an urban problem as well as kind of a small market town problem as well. But actually, in saying the villages and smaller towns around the county of Kilkenny that you've identified, the 250 properties, is there demand for people to live there?
Yeah, there is. I mean, Callan is an area.
Are there school places in those areas?
I mean, Callan now is a particular area of focus. It's one of the 6 pilot towns in the country for this pilot residential regeneration project. In fact, we're having a coming together tomorrow of the 6 towns in Callan, and we're concentrating on Upper Bridge Street in Callan, which is part of the medieval core of Callan. And
why Callan? Why was that chosen, just as a matter of interest?
Because there's a very high level of vacancy in Callan as a whole, and this particular street, half the buildings are vacant. Out of 27 buildings in the street, 14 are vacant. And now we're looking at them with firm of architects from Cork, Cotter and Nasons, and we're another area of to turn them back into residential accommodation. Another area of focus is deep energy retrofit for older buildings, because most of them date from the 1830s. A lot of them are protected structures, have particular architectural conservation issues. Okay. And we simply can't demolish these buildings and start again. They're in narrow streets with parking problems, traffic issues. But they're in the centre of Callan, which has very good schools, very vibrant arts community, a couple of lovely cafes. There's one actual place has been reopened in the last couple of years, is a real hub of activity. It's a cafe.
And what about employment opportunities then? I mean, obviously there has to be some work to have regeneration in that particular town.
But Callan is only like 10 or 12 minutes drive from Kilkenny City, and a lot of people are being priced out of the market in Kilkenny City.
Kilkenny, is that right? Yeah. Because Kilkenny is also very commutable to Dublin, isn't it? I mean,
it is. Yeah, it's a bit.
Do you see that much?
There are quite a number of people commuting from Kilkenny to Dublin, but then say the likes of Callan would be close enough to Waterford or Clonmel, or a lot of.
So I suppose what I'm trying to drive at is it attractive for a person working in Dublin to go down to Kilkenny and take a vacant home down there and then perhaps commute? What do you think, is that workable?
I think it's a bit of a stretch now. It wouldn't be that attractive, I'd say. Maybe Carlow would be a little bit closer. But no, I mean, we would like to see people living and working,
and contributing to the town.
Yeah,
that's really what I'm trying to get. So you would have that preference.
And I keep meeting people in Callan saying, "Oh, I'd love to live right in the centre of town, and and have my kids walking to school, and there's lots of sports facilities and stuff going on." And there was a big production allied to the Arts Festival in Callan called the Big Chapel last week, which was a huge success. So there's a lot of.
So the whole idea is to try and keep people within the vicinity.
Yeah, there's a great community spirit, and it's really to tap into that. So we're looking at inventive ways of reincorporating modern standard accommodation in these older buildings, and using the backlands for parking, and maybe little residential newer developments, and open up areas that have been sort of just kind of blocked off.
Vacant and blocked off. Yeah.
It's an interesting one. One of the things when we've looked at trying to regenerate rural areas, particularly those that aren't within commuting distance of main employment hubs, looking at the work remote schemes. So is there any co-working space or a work remote space in Callan, or is that something that's being considered?
No, but we're considering all sorts, and I think there's a lot of different strands to this. Financial incentives, broadband, dare I say it. There's loads of different issues going on. As well as trying to attract young people to stay. It's quite an older population.
Yeah. Is there an issue that it's bypassed as well? Because in fact, I used to live and work outside Kilkenny, and then I lived outside Kilkenny and commuted a couple of times a week to Kerry. And so I always remember Callan as being off the road, and I'm actually trying to think, have I ever driven into it? And despite having driven past it so many times, I actually don't think I've ever been in the village of Callan.
It used to be on the road to Cork.
Right.
And so, I mean, the place improved when it was bypassed, but with the bypass, the shops in that street shut down one by one. And, then
So this is, I think I love the idea of a pilot project running in a town like this, because I think that's so typical of so many towns right across the country. Now, I actually wasn't familiar at all with the residential regeneration project you mentioned until today. So how is that different? What new is it bringing in terms of options for...
Well, just to say that the other 5 towns are Ballinrobe and Banagher, Castleblaney, Cappoquin in County Waterford, and Boyle, County Roscommon.
So there's a nice regional spread there as well.
Now, as say, we've been meeting with the other towns, and a lot of the same issues are coming out, but then there's particular issues in each of the towns as well.
Of course.
But most of these have kind of historic town centres and, historic buildings or historic building fabric. So I think there's different approaches being taken in different ones. Some of them then are part of a master plan for the town to develop the town. I think Callan is not too bad, considering there is a very vibrant community. There's some of the other towns are quieter and have more
Callan,
vacancy.
The proximity of Callan to Kilkenny City, of all the places you mentioned, that probably has the shortest proximity to the largest centre.
Yeah.
I'm just thinking, we were up in Castleblaney only in the last few days. Castleblaney and a couple of other towns between Cavan and Monaghan, and there's I was actually saying it's the first time on a motorway or on I'm not sure if it was a motorway or dual carriageway, obviously dual carriageway actually, where I saw signs when we were travelling around and trying to choose what towns to go into, and I think Carrickmacross had Foodie Town, and there was a hashtag on it, and it was the first time I've ever seen a hashtag on an Irish signpost before. I was fascinated by it, but actually we did make it our business to go to smaller towns and larger market towns around Monaghan and Cavan and Carrickmacross and Castleblaney and a few others. And I was really surprised to see that there's definitely efforts being made. I think local businesses and the local community, people seem to be aware now that they need to be their own saviours. In this.
And I think
they need to step up themselves.
If we could even get a few, we're concentrating on 5 particular buildings in this street. If we could get 1 or 2 refurbished to a good standard using best practice conservation principles, nice timber windows and those kind of good finishes, that would bring on other people and encourage, I think if one person did it and, to incentivise other people.
Of course it would, and activity breeds activity as well.
Yeah.
This might be an unfair question to ask, but who owns those buildings, the 5 you've identified?
We're engaging with the owners.
Are they all private owners?
They're all private owners. One family owns 3, and then the other families, again, now they were left the properties, which is typical of a lot of the vacant homes. There's 8 siblings. In one case, it was a drapery shop. Beautiful, but falling into disrepair, and now there's a flooding problem. Which, there's all sorts of
back to you, because I was speaking to a Mayo politician without giving any hints, and this person was saying that there's quite an amount of people leaving their properties, both commercial properties and domestic properties, and going and say Galway and so forth. So, just as everyone was saying there, is it a problem now? Do you think regionally that properties are being left vacant and because there's no interest in them, because the town is actually dying?
Well, I think that there are problems there. I think some people have decided, I suppose, when we had the recession and that, to obviously seek employment elsewhere. So that particular property, but as Evelyn mentioned, I think people have been left property that they wouldn't have had, maybe a kind of a bond. Or And I think that's important as well. So they probably don't feel there's no real, I suppose, incentive there or attachment.
But the town then it becomes dilapidated.
It does,
which is causing a problem.
And the problem then is that if you get 1 or 2 properties on a street, it can have, a detrimental effect on that street, because it
sort of a domino effect.
And it impacts the properties around it.
Sure.
So, as I said before, I think it not only is that vacant property, but it has an impact on other properties, because I think it brings down the economic value. It certainly has a visual effect.
Is there antisocial behaviour?
Antisocial
well,
behaviour.
Depopulating, isn't it? Depopulation.
Yeah, and antisocial behaviours, and you get even an awful lot. I suppose local authorities and tidy towns, and tidy towns groups. I mean, a lot of them, when they see derelict properties, it because in relation to marking and that, from the judges and that, it does have a huge impact.
Yeah.
And I think the whole thing of derelict, and there's also health and safety issues, because a derelict building that's not kept, I mean, you can get
maintenance
slates falling,
glass falling out of windows.
I mean, so all these things have a huge impact.
Doesn't take long for a building to fall into disrepair.
Of course.
And that's the thing. So I think it does. And then, of course, the situation then it's called it becomes kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy, because it takes much more money then to bring it back into use. Yeah. So it suddenly then becomes less attractive for someone to engage in that. Yeah. So I think, but
I think one of the problems as well with the older buildings is that people don't think they're fit for purpose in the modern day, and that they're impossible to heat and do up. But we're trying to demonstrate that it is possible. And a lot of these have nice high ceilings and nicely proportioned rooms. Some of them are a bit pokey, I understand. But there are ways of turning it into a decent standard of accommodation. This is what our consultant architects are looking at. Yeah. And that it is possible to bring them up to a comfortable energy standard as well.
Okay, and you mentioned
rather than abandoning them.
Yeah, you mentioned a deep energy retrofit. What's that project? Or what's that scheme?
Well, there isn't a scheme at the moment. I know there was the controversial one that was talked about a couple of weeks ago, the SEAI one, but that wasn't even applicable to these. That was applying to mostly post 1970s buildings. And we've been trying to engage with SEAI to bring in. I think there's talk of bringing in something for heritage buildings and a heritage rating, energy rating, that you give credence to the embodied energy in the building, that rather than starting from scratch, building a brand new building, you've got the structure there already and you have to just enhance that structure. And there's a lot of merit in the thick walls and the existing roofs or streetscape and
but I can see how that would be perceived as, and probably correctly, as very expensive. So is this one of the reasons why owners, so for example in Callan you're dealing with very specific ones, but I suppose on a more general basis, would that be one of the reasons why people are leaving properties vacant?
Definitely. And I mean, say to contrast it with, say, Dublin City, people would jump at the chance of doing up these buildings because the return is there.
Well, they still have the same issue of vacancies over shops and things.
But the value of, the return on their investment would be better. Yeah. That's just in a general sense. But we're putting ballpark figures on these in this pilot project just to get an idea, get a sense of what it's going to cost. So, I mean, maybe we'll try and purchase one ourselves as a county council and do that as an exemplar project.
And would you do it as a purchase, or have you considered a CPO route?
Well, if we can agree to purchase from one particular family, I think Mayo are trying something like that in Ballinrobe, so that might be a good model to show that the county council are serious about this.
Have CPOs been used? I know they have been used by some local authorities, and we heard a presentation, I think it was Monaghan, that they've used it successfully.
And in Louth as well, I think. In Louth. Another local authority. And I think CPOs is certainly becoming more and more popular from that point of view.
Is it a last resort?
Well, I think the local authority will always try and engage with the owner to try and get the property, back into use. And sometimes even the threat of the CPO in some cases can be enough to try and motivate the owner. But
sorry, I'm going to clarify. Brian normally gives out to me when I use acronyms. That's a compulsory purchase order for anybody who's not familiar. See, I got them before you. Good.
So I think in a sense, and there was an Indicon report that came out, I suppose, that would encourage more and more use of compulsory purchase orders. And we're seeing, I think, all right, that local authorities are looking at that. They're looking at the Derelict Sites Act as well, to try and bring more and more properties back into use. And just, I suppose there was another thing as well, so there's another advantage, and I suppose we've touched upon it, but the whole thing in relation to climate change and climate action. I mean, one of the great benefits to bringing a vacant property back into use is that you've already, I suppose, in a sense, it has less impact on the environment, because a lot of the key infrastructure is already in place. So you already have, in relation to, you might have the road in place, you have the utilities such as ESB water. So in a sense, there is less of a carbon emissions in order to bring a vacant property back into use. So I think now, we do obviously need new builds, and new builds are important, but from a climate point of view as well, I think bringing vacant homes or vacant properties back into use certainly as well, I think, has maybe less of an impact on
We're just about a minute left. I'm just interested, Evelyn, to know why Callan was hit with these vacant homes, because, with the greatest respect to Mayo, I always associated vacant homes with sort of second homes and so forth. Did the developers there, what happened that they sort of went in there? Was there some sort of potential plans to bring industry to the town, or what?
No, this was just the older buildings in the street.
Oh,
the street,
I see.
and a lot of the problems arise from traffic, because the medieval street is very narrow. There's inadequate footpaths, and it's just deemed to be unattractive and unsafe. Yeah. And one by one.
So I think it's important then to because I have this image in my mind of the remember after when the crash happened, there were these vacant estates with
the ghost estate.
And now it's not just those as well; it's also streets that's houses that are already established on a street.
And this is in lots of towns in Kilkenny, the smaller towns and villages.
Yeah.
You know, Goresbridge,
so as you say, it's more, as you say, it's actually
Ballyhay,
regeneration really of the town.
The hurlers. Where all the hurlers are from. You know,
so it's not exactly.
There's not one shop left in Ballyhale village except a community shop, which was a reactivation of a vacant building that the county council owned, and community-led tea rooms, and that's a huge.
So it's a mistake to think that it's bad planning. In other words, that has led to this.
Again, that's the motorway bypass. It's kind of been the death knell for some of the villages.
Well,
you know,
I'm a product of the Christian Brothers, so I've been there. The founder of the Christian Brothers was
Ignatius
Rice. Yeah, no, that's an interesting one. And Evelyn, we might just come back and speak to you another time to see how that pilot residential regeneration project is coming along. It would be an interesting one. So thank you so much for being with us here today, Tom. I know you're going to be joining us after the break to discuss the vacant home situation here in the capital with John Ryan, the Vacant Homes Officer in Dublin City Council. So stay tuned.
Everything's fine on 93.9 Dublin South FM.
So welcome back to Property Matters here in Dublin South FM with Carol Tanner and myself, Brian Fox, for our Vacant Home Special. Staying with us is Tom Gilligan, Director of Service at Mayo County Council, and now we're delighted to be joined by John Ryan, Vacant Homes Officer with Dublin City Council. John, very welcome.
Thank you very much, and good evening.
Good evening. We've talked about the rural scene. What's the urban scene now with vacant homes in Dublin and the counties, the adjoining counties?
Well, as you know, Dublin is a very populated city. It's high density. There's a strong demand for housing there. Much of the property is in use already in Dublin City Council. Under the Rebuilding Ireland initiative, the City Council set up a vacant action plan for the city. And there was three parts to that. There was one, to tackle dereliction in the city. Two, to tackle underutilised sites and lands for development potential. And three, to tackle the level of vacancy within the city. As part of that, the active land management unit look after the underutilised, undeveloped sites. Dereliction is controlled by the planning and the planning process. And vacancy is by myself as the Vacant Housing Officer for Dublin City Council.
Okay, and do we have any idea about the levels of vacancy here in Dublin?
Yes, we do. As the Vacant Housing Officer, it's my duty to try and identify and record and reduce the level of vacancy in the built environment within the city. In other words, existing stock that's already out there, buildings. What we did at the very start was to establish a task force to look at the level of vacancy within the city. So what we did was we used already data that we had from the 2016 CSO from that, and then we picked 4 electoral divisions within the city. We went out and we carried out an in-depth survey in relation to those 4 areas within the city, and what we found was that there was vacancy, but it wasn't at the level that was expected, because there's a difference in the vacancy. There's short-term vacancy and there's long-term vacancy. And what we're looking at is long-term vacancy. When we say short-term vacancy, we're talking about transient vacancy. And by that we mean that properties may be vacant because they're for sale. Somebody has died. Somebody is waiting to acquire a property. Whereas long-term vacancy, we're looking at properties that are 6 months or longer.
And would they ones that are maybe not suitable for occupation, or that there might be reasons, as in, they've been acquired for somebody who doesn't want to?
Sometimes some of the properties that we looked at were second properties that someone had bought or acquired for family members. And
Or
for
maybe
that,
inherited or something.
sometimes people inherited them. Sometimes properties are vacant because there's legal issues, there's probate, somebody might be sick and might be in long-term care. And they're most of the reasons that we find on the ground that these properties are vacant. The other reason is that someone may inherit a property, inadvertently inherit a property, mightn't have the knowledge or the technical skills to do up the property, and the property is left sitting there vacant. But any property, as you know, within the city, if it's anyway reasonable, it's already let.
Okay, so then for the situation you just mentioned there, as in, people that maybe don't have the money to bring their property back to a condition where it can actually be used as a home, what are the solutions or what's available there?
Well, the City Council has a number of solutions on its website. If you look up www.dublincity.ie and look up the housing, we have a number of different solutions there. We have long-term leasing, we have the buy and renew scheme.
Oh yeah, how popular is that within Dublin City Council environment?
The buy and renew scheme is very, very popular in Dublin. To date, since 2017, since the introduction of the scheme, we've acquired 40 properties to date. We have another 15 properties coming online very shortly that we've agreed terms and conditions with the owners to acquire those properties. 20 of the properties that we have acquired were by CPO, by
20 of the 40.
Yeah, by planning. They are returned and in use and are tenanted by families. We're glad to say, and that's a very good story. 20 of them at the moment are in various different stages of refurbishment. Now, the refurbishment process there can take anything from 2 months up to 12 months to refurb properties, because don't forget, these properties are long-term vacant. They mightn't have parts of the structure might be in disrepair. The roofs might be gone, staircases missing, windows. There's a lot of work to be done on these, and sometimes these are the reasons why people haven't got the funds to do up the properties, in which case to apply to us for the buy and renew scheme, in which the City Council acquires the property with the consent of the owner. Going forward, then we go in, we carry out condition surveys, we refurbish the properties, and then we give them to allocate it to tenants on our housing lists.
Okay. See, I suppose we've just spoken with Evelyn Graham from KIlkenny County Council, and we were talking about how some of these vacancies, the vacant homes, are in places where there simply isn't the demand. So, is it fair to assume that in all of your area there is strong demand?
There's very, very strong demand in Dublin City, and in Dublin City Council's administrative area for properties to be in use.
Of course, yeah.
And we find, and I suppose we find as well with the Vacanthomes.ie website, that most of the response we're getting is from Leinster and from Munster. In relation to, we have about 84%, if you take Leinster and Munster together, 84% of people are log properties from those two provinces, 13% from Connacht and 3% from Munster.
And that's because they want to move out of Dublin?
No, but that's because that's, I suppose, in
that's
the sense
where they're noticing
that's where they're, so we're getting, I suppose, what we're delighted to see is that where there is a real housing need, most of the response coming to Vacanthomes.ie is coming from Leinster and from Munster.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
So that really is the key thing. And the other thing as well, I think what John has mentioned, which is a very good point, was in relation to the time it takes to bring a vacant property back into use. If you're building a property, it can take anything maybe from 15 to 18 months or whatever, but bringing a vacant property back into use, some of them can be brought back within a very, relatively short period of time, which has another advantage as well. So you're able to bring that property and provide a home to a family maybe at a quicker pace than you would if you were waiting for a new build. So that's another advantage, I suppose, in relation to the whole thing of bringing vacant property back into use. Okay,
but I'm so surprised to hear those stats of the numbers being reported or being logged, the number of new homes being logged on the website Vacanthomes.ie. That 80+% are between Munster and...
Yeah, that's right. I mean...
So I understand that maybe sounds like good news on the face of it because that's where the strong demand. But would that not be quite quite an imbalance there, or mismatch in terms of the number of vacancies in Connacht.
Well, I suppose there would be a large number of vacancies in Connacht, but I suppose from the point of view of where the focus is and where the real housing need is, I mean, we're seeing, the counties such as Cork County, Cork City, Kerry, then we're seeing the likes of Dublin, Louth, Meath, Kildare, Wicklow. I mean, those counties in particular probably would be the highest number of people of counties that properties would be logged from. So it's from that point of view, I suppose, in a sense, it's encouraging, and I said just to thank all those people who do log properties, because it allows, like Sir John, in order to follow up.
If I can, just that Dublin City Council has a vacant housing register we've set up ourselves. We've logged all the properties that people have come to us and told us that are potentially vacant, including the Vacant Homes website. We have 589 properties logged on that. They have the potential to be vacant properties. We have to carry out due process to ensure that they're vacant. Now, as I said to you, we only have 55 properties coming on stream. We've carried out 289 inspections, physical inspections of going out and visiting these properties.
Are they ones that members of the public would have logged with you?
Members of the public, data from the Vacanthomes.ie, councillors, TDs. People will come to us and say there's a potential, this property is here of this address, at which stage we log it.
Yeah.
And then we carry out a due process of going out, a desktop survey, and then we send somebody out to have a look to confirm if it's vacant or not.
And actually, I think
Some
that's
of them
really
are,
important.
some of them aren't.
Yeah, no, that's a really important point, because actually that's something we discussed earlier in the show, because obviously we want members, because I agree, Tom, you mentioned there the community knows best, and I think that's a really important point. So actually, something that might appear vacant might not actually be vacant.
Precisely.
So I think it's really important that people know that if they log this, it's okay if they're wrong, that you're actually going to carry out the necessary checks to see.
The people only need to come to us and let us know that there's the potential of a vacant property there. Just give us the address of the property and that's it. Following from that, the City Council will due process in relation to identifying exactly, ensuring that the property first of all exists, the correct address exists, and then we will carry out our investigations in relation to, is it vacant, do we deem it vacant, at which stage we then follow one of our processes in relation to trying to get the owner return the property to use. Now that in itself is a long process, because we have to do, once we confirm or we suspect that a property is vacant, then we do a title research to ascertain who is the actual owner of that property. Not all properties are registered.
Of course. That's a particular problem in Dublin City as well, isn't it?
It is indeed, and our law agent deals with that. And once we get that, then we issue correspondence to the relevant owner or owners of that property. We issue a first letter. We advise them that we note that the property may be vacant, at which stage we'd ask them to put the property back into use in a timely manner. We'd advise them of the buy and renew and the repair and lease scheme and our long-term leasing schemes. And we'd wait for return correspondence or reply. If we don't receive any replies, we issue a second letter.
Okay, and how long do you give the owners to respond to that?
About 3 months.
Okay, and that's a very fair.
That's fair. That's fair. We deem that fair and reasonable. We issue a second letter. And subsequent to that, if a person doesn't, or an owner doesn't reply to us, then we issue a third letter saying that we would be considering using our legislative powers to compel that person to return the property to use in a timely manner. Now, I have to say, 95% of the respondents of these letters engage with us.
Okay.
And as I said, the property may be vacant for a reason. Okay, and once the people come back to us, or the owner comes back to us and outlines the rationale behind why the property is vacant, then we take a decision as to what way we proceed best on that.
And that sounds fair and reasonable, because I know there's so many circumstances that a property might be vacant now, but it's not the intention for it to remain vacant. But when you're engaging with these owners, What kind of reception are you getting? Are they annoyed that you're interfering with their property rights? Are they annoyed that you're even questioning their use of their own property? Or, are they resistant?
I have to say no to that answer. They're not resistant. The majority of them are fairly good with us. They communicate the reasons why. They know that there's a strong housing demand out there at the moment, and that there's a need to provide housing.
Do they all have a reason why?
The property, well, everyone will have their own individual, each case is different, have their own individual reason why a property, but we look at that. Sometimes some of the people might be in long-term care. They might have agreements with these care facilities. We can't do anything about
the
that.
The Fair Deal
currently.
scheme has not been a positive for bringing for the homes being used. I think the current structure of the fair, and I know this isn't the show to be discussing it, but I think it's fair to say that, when it comes to government policy, there has to be some joined up thinking, and I think the current Fair Deal scheme doesn't support
there's a possibility it
the
needs
use
to be
of,
reviewed in the current format.
Just from the point of view, John, of coordination with the various local authorities around Dublin, do you do exchange of data or anything like that in relation to or exchange of information?
Under GDPR, we can't.
Oh,
we're not allowed to do that. We can only collect the data for which
Dublin City Council.
we have a use for it. So our data is our data in relation to that. The Vacant Homes site will advise of properties that come new.
Yeah,
and that's the only data.
That's the channel to go through, the medium to go through. In other words, yeah.
We're actually having on the 19th of September here in Dublin. We're actually having a launch of a Vacant Homes network. So in relation to network of Vacant Home Officers. So, and I mean, it's great because we'll be able to, because every Vacant Home Officer, I think, has so much learnings and so much advice, that they, in relation to how to engage with property owners, how to use the various schemes. So I suppose in a sense,
just from the point, everybody's
learn
looking
of each other.
Everybody's looking at bottom lines nowadays. Is it cost effective, do you think? I mean, I know from a human point of view it probably is, because people are taking up houses. But from the point of view of the council, of the local authority itself, is it very time consuming, and
I think the reality is it's certain. I think it's absolutely
essential service. Yeah.
Because I think as outlined before, when you do bring a vacant home back into use, and when you do see a family,
it's worth the cost.
The cost, but the cost element of it, it's still better to actually bring that. Because I suppose that the cost of the homeless services obviously is expensive as well. So I think if you can bring a property back into use, get a family into that property, it's much more effective, much more economically effective, and much more effective, I think, psychologically as well on the family. And I think from
morally it's
from
something
a
there's an
community point of
obligation
view as well. You're allowing people to establish roots in a certain area, in a certain community. So there are so many benefits. So certainly I think from that point of view it's very, very worthwhile.
Yes.
And I think that part is, it is clear. I think there is a moral imperative as well as an economic reasoning for it. But I think maybe where some of the mismatch has been maybe the difference between vacant and dereliction. So John, this might be something that in Dublin City Council you might just touch on that for us. I mean, I presume that if something is vacant, as in just not being used, even in the long term, as in 6 months plus, it's very different to a property that's derelict, that might be just too big a job, too costly a job.
Well, under dereliction, you have the Derelict Sites Act, and our planning department deal with that. And under the Derelict Sites Act, there's strict criteria that a property must meet to be deemed derelict. And under that process, they use They write to the various owners of the properties, and if they don't conform to what's being requested, then they can use their CPO process to compel the people or to buy the properties and acquire them for the city council, and then we'll put them back into use. We have done it on a number of houses, but it also happens in relation to other property, commercial property, shops and stuff like that. Vacancy, as I said, it can be transient or long term.
Yeah.
We're looking at the long-term effects of it and the benefits for the community.
Very good.
eco-wise and from a neighbour's point of view, and having a property that's done up beside them.
There are so many
tangible and intangible benefits to.
I think it's very clear there are benefits.
Oh, absolutely. We'll leave it there. John, Ryan and Tom Gilligan, thanks so much for coming in. That's it, that's it from us today in the studio. And thank you for joining us on Property Matters, the show where Property Matters. Get in touch with the show by emailing hello@iPropertyRadio.com or on Twitter at iPropertyRadio.
Okay, and we'd like to thank Tom and all of his team at Mayo County Council, also Evelyn, John and all the Vacant Homes Officers across the 31 local authorities in Ireland for their amazing work on this very important issue at such an important time for Ireland. Also thanks to Shane Flynn, who's on sound, and our producer Katie Talon. We're back the same time next week. From Brian Fox and myself, Carol Talon. Have a great week, and please don't forget to check out Vacanthomes.ie and start logging any vacant homes in your area.